The best way to predict the future is to create it. Welcome to the Humanscape podcast, where we help business leaders prepare for the future of work now. Are you ready to bring work to life and life to work? We are. Let's go. We're back and better than ever with another episode of the Humanscape podcast from HumanWorks 8. And today, on our journey, we'll be joined by the city of Sun Prairie, and together we will form a collaborative heart. I'm Sean Gaulius, the thought catalyst with HumanWorks 8, and joining me is Jason Cochran, the adaptive futurist at HumanWorks 8. And we'll be your host today. As a reminder, the Humanscape podcast exists to help organizational leaders like you prepare for the future of work now. In just a few minutes, you'll hear from today's guest, Caitlin Stene from the city of Sun Prairie in Wisconsin. We'll discuss and learn from Caitlin about what's important in the city around people and culture. So I'll go back to where I started a few minutes ago and say if culture were cities, the city of Sun Prairie starts from a collaborative heart. Here's a little about Caitlin before we begin the conversation together. Caitlin Stene is the director of Administrative Services for the city of Sun Prairie in Wisconsin, where she oversees the human resources, clerks, finance, IT, and assessing departments. Prior to working for the city, Caitlin served as the deputy administrator clerk for the village of Wanakee and the administrator for the village of Cross Plains. You can tell Caitlin's been across Wisconsin there. That's just a little bit about Caitlin, but she also shared with us her personal values, which really brought a smile to my face. She said some things she thinks about as far as values were creativity, belly laughs, and Caitlin and I have had a laugh together, caffeine, and quality time. So without further ado, let's get started with Caitlin. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to join you and Jason today.
Thanks so much. What's one thing from your bio that I didn't mention that you're most proud of? It could be personally or professionally, just something that I didn't mention that you're really proud from your bio.
Yeah, I think obviously my bio is very professional. So I think on the personal side of things, I am a mother to one 4.5-year-old little girl named Josephine. And I think that is probably something I'm most proud of because I think other parents agree, like your world completely changes when you become a parent. And it's been a roller coaster, but I'm definitely proud to be a parent to her and watch her grow and become a strong young lady.
Caitlin, you brought up something that I've been thinking about for a long time. I think parenting and the skills, learning, all that kind of stuff should be part of somebody's bio, should be part of their learning, should be part of their life experience, because doesn't it sometimes apply to work as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think I am not me without her and my family. And I come to work differently every single day, depending on how the morning goes or the night went before or the weekend. Sometimes I look forward to Mondays because I feel like it's the start of my weekend in a sense of she's back at preschool and I'm able to come and just be with my professional colleagues and not worry about snack time.
Wow, you brought that back to me. I always say it shouldn't be any kind of job description or you're filling out your resume. I think it's about life experience, because we all bring such different life experiences to work. So you've already kicked off the episode and put something in my head again about the importance of that. We like to start, Caitlin, with what we call 3 parts of the mind, where we visit and learn about and find out about the people we're talking with across their cognitive ability, their affective personality, and then around conation, about how they like to just take action if they're free to do it their way. So I'll ask the first question, then I'll toss it to Jason for the second. But the first question is, what's something that a hidden skill or talent, or what are you smart about that people may not be aware of? And it doesn't have to be work related, but it can be. Well, something you're smart about that people may not be aware of.
So I like to say my hidden superpower is not something that comes out professionally a lot, but it goes back to one of my values of creativity. I love doing all sorts of crafts and being creative in my free time because I feel like that really fuels me. My job requires a lot of analytical skills, a lot of black and white, a lot of, you know, day to day processing in some places. One of my values is that creativity, and I love crafting. I sound like an old lady, I know, but my mom was very crafty growing up. So, you know, I do lots of different, I crochet, I knit, I embroider, I needlepoint, I do all the sorts of creative, crafty things in my free time that I think just helps. That's the outlet that I have.
I think that's a great one. I bet that helps with balance. You know, when I hear people having that more hands-on kind of escape and work, it's just, and I see you. I can see you. Our listeners can't see you shaking your head. Said, "Yes, Sean, that helps with balance," which is fantastic.
Yeah, we joke around here. We have this new employee development program, and we have a Shine program related to our values where our employees share what fuels them. So, like last week, we had a pickleball class taught by one of our employees who's a pickleball enthusiast, and everyone keeps pushing. They want crafting with Caitlin, and they want me to like give them a supply list and teach them a craft. Yeah, I think it comes out. It's also kind of my daughter now thinks I can make anything. So she just sees something like, Mom, will you make that for me? Will you make that for me? So it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
Well, and I can't leave what you just said. So you said you started this program based on one of your new values, Shine, where people are bringing in things that help them with that balance and sort of teaching it back to the rest of your team. Is that what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched as part of our values rollout, which I'm sure we'll get into, an employee gym, which is what we're calling our professional and personal development, our program. We call it the gym because you come to the gym as you are with whatever skills you have. And the idea of the gym is by the time you leave, you've improved something, right? But we meet you where you are. So one of our gyms is the Shine Gym, and it's all about fun at work and creativity and embracing. I'm in talks with one of our employees is a huge beekeeper, so she's going to do like how do you start beekeeping. Last week we had an employee who we used to always joke with him about his pickleball passion, and I was just like, let's teach a class. And 9 of us showed up last Friday. It wasn't a huge group, but it was a fun group to learn pickleball. And so we're trying to figure out how to honor those pieces of our employees and have fun at work, right? Because you spend so much time with your people at work. I think it's great.
I love that. And it really honors them by, you know, sort of mentoring and teaching others about a skill that I may not be aware of that could help my well being and my balance at the same time. And you said nine isn't a lot, but I think the longer you just started this process and the longer you do it, it's really going to, I think, really develop. And people are going to get more and more interested. I'm so glad people are already, you know, volunteering, raising their hands, saying, "Hey, I've got something." Caitlin, if I had an applause button, I would be hitting the applause button on that one. So that all came from just asking you a cognitive crafting. But Jason, what's the next question you wanted to ask Caitlin?
Yeah. So before I ask this affective one, I've got to dig into the pickleball a little bit here because Caitlin, you're speaking my language. I just bought a pickleball set for me and my two older boys. They're home on summer vacation. My wife, Rachel, is like, oh my gosh, we got to get them out of the house doing something. We've got a park just north of us where they have some pickleball courts now. And so it's like, well, this seems like something simple enough we can just pick up and go do. So we are about to embark on our pickleball journey in the Cochran household as well. And let me tell you, here in Indianapolis, where we live, pickleball's really picking up. There is a place down the street that's being built called Pickle and Chicken, where evidently people will go and eat chicken wings and pickles and then play pickleball. Hopefully they're doing it in reverse order, play the pickleball first and then do the eating after. And then a 24/7 pickleball facility is opening up. So it really is one of those areas of interest for a lot of people. And I love that you're activating that for your teams at Sun Prairie. That is so cool. So that leads into the second question. So we got all that just from the cognitive part. Let's do an affective one. How about something that's a favorite of yours? Could be a favorite food, a favorite place, a favorite band, a favorite song, a favorite thing to do. What is that favorite thing of yours that comes to mind?
My family growing up, you guys might remember this. My dad used to own video update chains which are like a blockbuster. So my family was huge into movies growing up. He got out of that business just in time, obviously, because of the Netflix and streaming. But my all-time favorite movie that I can watch on repeat is You've Got Mail. So I can watch that movie. Like my husband knows it's just like that comfort space. I don't even have to watch it, but that is like my all-time favorite.
I love that, Caitlin. So one of the other things I've tried to do to tie into this, I created a kind of a movie bucket list this summer because my wife and I were chatting a few weeks ago, and I realized I've never seen many of the rom-coms before. Not only with her, but just ever period. I haven't seen You've Got Mail, Sleepless in Seattle, When Harry Met Sally. So I've got a lot of things to do in that regard to catch up. So I love that that's one of your favorites is to watch that movie. It's got me hooked. I'm definitely gonna go watch those.
That's fun, Caitlin. And the third part of the mind is when we talk about Caitlin's natural instincts and the way, if you have the freedom to take action your way, what feels best? How do you jump in when you have a desire to work on a project, to start something? What's the first thing you do? How do you jump in and start your way, Caitlin?
I'm a big mind mapper of, first of all, I'm a very much of like, what's the end goal and let's work backwards. So I am a very much a deadline person and what's the end product you're looking for. And so I'm very much like, let's take from there and step back kind of mind map of, okay, here's what I think are the logical steps. Here's where I think we're going with it. So that's kind of how I break down big problems or big projects is I think, okay, well, A, when does it due? Because if it's 3 months out, I'm probably not going to work on it right away because I got time. And then I kind of think logically backwards.
I like that. So it's like sequencing and order and getting that sort of plan together. But I also heard, maybe I, start this and not come back to it based on timing too. So Caitlin, thanks. You know, if we're transitioning to the work, you already started us there with your Shine program and the gym. And I bet we'll get back to the gym. I love that analogy and that workout as far as development. But how did your path start, Caitlin? How did you end up today focused on people and culture in Sun Prairie? Can you take us a little bit through your path that brought you to the great work you're doing today?
Yeah, so kind of my path to local government and why local government a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So I graduated high school and thought I wanted to get into marketing and work for a big ad firm. That is what I thought, kind of linking back to my creative side. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to work for a big ad firm. I'm going to do all this fun and creative things. Then you go to college, obviously, and you have this whole process of discovery in college. And I took an intro to public administration class as one of my required liberal arts. And in that class, I learned that the volunteerism and the giving back to my community that I loved doing and that was instilled upon me growing up could be a career. It could be a career in some form of a government. And I was like, that kind of got my wheels turning. And so then I started the process of having numerous internships. I interned for one summer out in Washington, D.C. for a Minnesota congressman, and I quickly realized through that internship that the federal level of government was not for me. The things and the topics we were dealing with and stuff like that were just so disconnected to me, to the residents back in Minnesota, and seemed kind of sometimes obtuse and hard to grasp. And so I was like, federal government is not where I want to end up. The next summer, I worked for the Secretary of State's office in Minnesota on their voter outreach team. So I went to every single lutefisk small town festival for the summer, getting people registered to vote and like really talking to residents about, okay, here's your polling place, here's how you vote, here's how you do this. And we also taught their first time voter classes. So new citizens to the United States with the League of Minnesota Voters. We taught them what a polling place felt like, what it was like to vote, what it was like to write on a ballot, what it was like to walk up to that machine and put it in. I was like, okay, I'm getting closer to residents. This feels more tangible, more impactful. Then I decided I wanted to obviously make a career out of working at some level of government. And I started researching MPA programs, Masters of Public Administration programs. I had a mentor, Dr. Carol Lindeman at Winona State, who really pushed me to look at the University of Kansas Masters of Public Administration program. And they focus exclusively on local government leadership, so training the next city administrators and managers of the country. I applied and got in, and that kind of just set me off in my love of local government. And I've been in this profession now for 13 years working for various local governments. And I just feel like what we do at the local government level, obviously, we're like the most trusted level of government, but we can make changes every day that impact our citizens on a positive level, which is what I love to do. You have a problem with your garbage pickup, we can call, we can fix that. You have a problem with your water, we can fix that. So I just love this level of government and the impact we have every day on our residents. So that's kind of how I got to local government. And then through my various positions, I've always had a human resources focus in each one of my positions, and so that's kind of just my love for helping people, working with people. The organizational culture I think is super important, and it's something we tend to overlook in local government, I think, because we are dealing with such like big problems. I think it's sometimes we don't really look inside to say, what is it like to work here? What is it like to be a member of the team? I think it's, some people call it like woo-y kind of work when all they want to do is plow a street, get trash picked up, keep the lights on for residents, help people vote. But I think in now, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but in today's work and employment arena, you have to know what it's like to work here, and you have to sell that to get talented people. So that kind of led us to working with Sean. When I started here, I started with the city of Sun Prairie at the end of 2021. And our organization invests a lot in high performance organizational training. We bring someone in twice a year and it's a way of thinking, right? It's a way of efficiency. It's a way of looking at our processes. And one of the big ground levels of HPO is, what are your organizational values? And everything you do should be grounded in those values, and everyone should know those values. Well, that was a huge glaring red flag for us because we didn't have organizational values. I mean, we had a vision, we had a mission, but like those are set up by our council, and they're very much like, what do we want to look like in 2030? What kind of services do we want to provide? It wasn't really tangible to an everyday employee. So then I saw Sean speak at a conference, and I was like, that's what we need. I totally bought into the Human Works framework of values of, they can't be pay to play, because if you look at a lot of local government or government in general, it's like integrity and trust. And it's like, well, I really bought into the Human Works. Like those are just, you have to have those to work here. But what are our values? So that kind of led us to working with Sean over the last probably year and a half now. Sean, we've been working with Human Aids and to come up with our, I think our really great, unique values for our organization that really speak volumes of what it's like to work here. I think the feedback we've gotten from staff, and is like, yeah, I see myself in those. Yep, those are ours. And so I think that has propelled our organization forward and is a huge tool for us in recruitment and retention. And we're starting to hear people like call each other out. Like, that's not showing up and stepping up. That's not the way we do things here. That's not the way we find a way. So it's been kind of cool to kind of see them, like, even in the short amount of time that we've been working with them, to hear people being like, nope, that's just not how we do it. We show up and we step up and we help that resident.
Caitlin, you're speaking my love language there a little bit. Thanks for all those kind words. I would just like to share what your new values are. And when did you roll the new values out? Before I'll build a little bit of suspense to people. When did you have the full organization and city administration roll out?
I believe that was in March, right? March, April. Yeah.
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 And what they rolled out, are your 5 new values were show up and step up. And you've already used that. And you said people were using that to call people out. I bet in a very direct but kind way. Now they have a way to do that because they have this new language. Collaborative heart, which I've already mentioned a couple times. Guide and grow, which I bet we'll get into a little bit more how you're using that value. You've already mentioned shine as one of your values. And I have to say, with that particular value, when I heard that word used by multiple employees across your team, and one in particular, she said, I'm allowed to shine here. And I'll never forget that being said, because it just really teared me up. I was like, wow, that's it. That's what it's about. And then your last value was find a way. So on that, you've already talked about, you've used the value with people calling them out. You've used the shine value in your new development gym, how else are you trying to bring those values alive, whether you've already done or even your vision to the future, Caitlin? How are you trying to really operationalize them, bring them to life, make them living? And I hear you're doing a fantastic job if your team's already using them as part of their natural language. And congratulations. When I hear that, then I know you're doing the good work. But I'd love to hear either other things you've already done or even what your sights are for the future.
Yeah, so one big thing we're working on is we're revamping our entire employee evaluation system. We are going from a traditional competencies based evaluation system to what we are calling guide and grow and creating a coaching environment. So, right now, we ask a lot of like basically how many widgets did you make? Were you effective at making those widgets? Were you on time to make those widgets? Really, like kind of traditional checkbox kind of things. And we are transforming to our guide and grow coaching system, which is really asking what went well, what can you improve on, how can I help you as your manager, and how are we doing as an organization to more kind of encompass the ongoing relationship that is important between a supervisor and an employee and our commitment to guide and grow as in both personally and professionally. What do you need to be successful here? What have you been struggling with? What tools and skills what tools do we have in place to help you grow over that? We're also switching from an annual evaluation to every 6 months this conversation. And we are framing it as like this is an ongoing conversation. You're documenting it twice, but this is an ongoing relationship between you and your manager to really live out those values. So that's a really big way that we're trying to input our values. And we're hoping through that at the end of like, hey, how are we doing? We get some really concrete feedback from employees too about how, yeah, you have these values, but I'm not seeing this one. I'm not seeing we're out of line here. So it's really kind of I think it's like a kind of a 360 in a way too. Like me as a manager, I have to be ready for feedback too from my employee, which wasn't really there in that old system of like checking and, what did your job description says you sweep streets. Did you sweep them well on a 1 to 5 scale? So that's one big way we're doing it. Another big way is we have what we're calling is our Shine Recognition program, where we are trying to collect those stories of how employees are living out our 5 values. So anyone can submit a story. Kind of goes back to how we developed the values with HumanWorks 8, but we know these stories are happening and we're trying to collect them and highlight them. So employees can submit a story of anyone living out a value from any department. It doesn't have to be within your own. Collecting those stories. We have a nice like pie shape. You can collect all the pies, which is all 5 of the values, get a small nominal prize for filling in your circle. And then the whole idea is that this annual employee summit, we will highlight the best of each of those categories and kind of say like, you are the Shine recipient for 2024 and here's the story. You showed up and stepped up for the organization and here's the story. Yeah, so we're just continually trying to think of like new ways to embed these. Obviously, from a recruitment standpoint, we now have a standard question on all our applications that says, of the organization's 5 values, which one speaks to you the most and why? Kind of get to that fit thing right away of like, it also gets into their brain. Like, you've read these as part of your application. What speaks to you? What can we expect from you as a fellow teammate here at the City of Sun Prairie?
Caitlin, on that journey of taking the values and getting them ingrained into the way that you do coaching, like moving from performance management into coaching, and then also into the recognition program, what were some of the challenges along the way that you had to be aware of and kind of navigate through along with our team to really get those in a place where they're running, really well now? What were some of those challenges and things you had to think through?
Yeah, so obviously with Guide and Grow, we are just starting the implementation. And the big thing there is we're trying to create coaches, and you can't flip a switch and make a manager a coach. And we recognize that and we know that, right? We know that we are asking our managers to go from probably a typical managerial role to becoming this coach. So we are really investing in our managers. We're calling our people managers, anyone who oversees a person, into trying to instill upon them what it means to be a coach. And we're doing this through a series of 5 in-person trainings over the next year before we even start. We're going to be doing 1 guide and grow this year, way later this year after 3 in-person sessions. But we're really trying to say, we know this is a journey. We are not expecting you to be a coach right today, but we want to meet you where you are and help you become that coach. And create this kind of support network of all of us too. Like we're all in this together to become coaches. So yet to be determined how successful we are, because we do realize it is a big lift, but something that we're committed to as an organization because we see that this is the way of the future. This is the way of building our own talent from within, because pipelines in local government are slim and we're really trying to embrace creating our own pipelines here. Taking that public works person who maybe just does street work right now, but hey, do they want to be a manager someday? Do they want to be an engineer someday? How can we get that out of them and invest in them to stay within? Kind of like that's our philosophy. And we think through these coaching conversations, we can identify those employees and then link that to the gym. Okay, manager seeing, here's your series to become a supervisor, right? Here's all the courses you should be taking. Here's the types of stuff that you should be investigating if you're just an employee who wants to become a manager someday. So like linking guide and grow to that gym, so that skill building.
That's fantastic. I know you had your first session that AJ from the team led. What did you think of that session, or how did you get any feedback from that initial development session?
So we got the feedback in the beginning of like, do I really need to go? Gosh, it's 2 hours or however long it was. I think it was 2 hours. I don't want to be, like the typical, because we're talking like, we're training cops, we're training wastewater treatment plant operators. It's like the full gamut of supervisors, right? And so what you could tell in the beginning, like people are kind of like, sit back, like I have to be here. My boss is making me be here. But by the end, people were like, wow, this was really great. I see this now. I understand this now. Obviously, there are still some people out there who are going to be kind of forced to be here, that and that. But we've heard a lot of like some positive feedback of like, that was great. Now I get it. I get what we're trying to do here. I understand my role. So I think it's been really great.
Caitlin, one thing, that I'm amazed by myself is that you just said you rolled out the new values in March, and already the traction and the ways that you're trying to bring them in, it seems like a lot to me, Caitlin. Can you share, how did you do so much so quickly? Or, do you feel it's a lot? Has it been, to talk a little bit about that journey? Because it's only June here, and you've talked about recognition, you talked about this new gym, you've talked about some development. How did you manage that? Any insight you would give to others when they're trying to look at bringing their values to life?
Well, first, I think there's something that you need to know about the city of Sun Prairie is that we go hard and we go fast. Like that show up and step up, batteries included, that Sean always says. Like that's so like to you, to someone outside, it might seem, wow, that's really fast. But to me, I'm like, this is just our culture. Like, this is what we do. Our employees are very much like, cool, you did the values, but if I don't start seeing them, why did I even come to the summit? So we knew we already had these things planned before the summit of like how we're rolling it out and reinforcing, because we knew there's just a short amount of time, I would think, before these things just get shelved and they're like, whatever that was. We knew we had to strike quickly, and we knew we had to start just embedding these as senior leadership in our everyday language for everyone else to like pick it up and realize like we're serious. We're not just like putting these on the wall, but we really wanted to embed them. I also think it helps that our values, I feel like they've always been here. We just didn't put the title to them, right? If someone 2 years ago would have said, what's it like working at the city of Sun Prairie, they would have said, find a way, right? Any problem that faces us, we find a way to figure it out, to solve it. I also think it helps that our values truly are unique to us and we're already here. Human Works 8 and Sean just helped us put really cool titles to them and define them to a truly unique way that we are. And it makes us be like, oh, we're already doing this. Oh, okay. But so I think that's kind of like twofold. A, they really were our values already. They were already here. And we knew we needed to start implementing them right away. Otherwise, they would have just sat like a lot of great local government plans. Sometimes they just sit on a shelf, and I didn't want that to happen to these. I wanted people to start seeing them. And I also would say, like, it's a team. It's a team of people making this happen, from our Parks and Rec director to our city administrator to our whole HR team, making this happen.
That's fantastic. And I think you'll inspire a lot of people to really think about that. One thing I just wanted to highlight you said is that, you had a plan in the background, even as you were working to sort of develop these, you knew right away that you needed to bring it to life. And that's something, Human Works 8 believes in and would really push. But again, hearing you talk about it today, I'm hearing things I didn't know you were doing, which that just brings joy to me, Caitlin. And it's right on track, which where I think you should be in this journey of bringing values to life in the city. You've talked about what you're doing. Are there any future challenges? It may be a year, 2 years from now, when you think about culture and people that maybe haven't figured out, but they're kind of on your mind or on the horizon there. Anything you'd want to share that you're struggling with, thinking about?
I think the one thing that is in my mind, is that transition from hiring for skill to hiring for fit. I think sometimes in lower level positions, we're really focused on hiring for skill. And I think we have to transition to hiring for fit and fully realize we can train you. We can teach you the Sun Prairie way. We can teach you how to do that, but we can't change who you are deep down. And I think that I get that. And I think embedding that even lower than me is going to be a challenge, because our interview questions are like, what type of equipment have you used? And I want to be like, I don't care what equipment they've used. What makes them tick? How are they in a team? So I think that is hard when we have such tangible things we have to do to keep the city running. I also think a lot of times it's like we don't want them to know how to do it a different way because we want them to know how to do it our way. So sometimes it's harder to unteach the way they know how to do it. So then it just stresses my point more of like, shouldn't we just be looking for the right fit, the right personality, the right person to come in here and be on our team? So that's what I kind of wrestle with too, especially when we start talking about pipeline and the labor market that we're in. It's like you gotta. It's an employee or a job seekers market, and how are we selling ourselves in those interviews? That we want you to be the right fit here, but we'll teach you, we'll grow you. So I think that is in my mind of how do we transition from kind of those traditional what accounting software have you used to those fit type interview questions.
And I think again, I would say you're definitely on the right track. Something definitely I believe in, Caitlin, and I think you know that, is that, so often hiring is done just from that cognitive part of our, that, and that's important. It's got to be done that way. Some skills that you need for a job, you don't want to train me on a lot of those city skills. I'll raise my hand. I'm not that person, but you also need to consider, that personality, that feeling, as well as just their natural instinct and the way they take action for the fit. And part of that effective and that feeling is just alignment with your values, which you've already started with a question, but how can you even, go a little deeper around that? Because once you have that, that's when you've got that strong engagement. So I hear it at being a struggle. I think a lot of organizations and different groups are thinking and feeling the same way. But I like your thoughtfulness about it, because I believe you're on the right track, and it's only going to gain in importance to find the talent for the future. So, Caitlin, we've talked a lot here. Jason, you usually like to ask a question around measurements or numbers. Anything you want to bring up that way, Jason?
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for calling out the nerdy aspect of the show, right? I love that, the numbers and stuff. But he's right. He's right. Everyone knows it by now. So, Caitlin, love to hear about what different leaders are measuring, right? Because we've heard the saying before, what's measured is what gets managed, or at least managed well.
That's literally on my computer screen. Peter Drucker, that quote.
Whoa.
Yeah, nerd to nerd here.
I love it. Nerd to nerd. And I feel like we need to have some pickleball and just nerd out on some metrics and stuff. Caitlin, we're going to have to do that sometime in Sun Prairie. But I'm curious, though.
And do a craft.
And a craft as well.
Maybe we can crochet
right.
a pickleball sleeve for our paddles.
I love it. I love it. There you go. But out of curiosity, you're doing some really cool things. You've been sharing them with us in the audience today. how are you measuring some of those things? Are there some kind of neat metrics or things that you're coming up with to be like, how are we moving the needle on these things and knowing if we're achieving what we want to achieve?
And now I'm going to call it a pain point for our organization is we move so quick that we're not great at measuring right now. So we are, as part of one of my things, many of things I'm working on this year is revamping our key performance indicator program to really make sure we are measuring the right thing. We are, and it's not a bad thing. We are very much a gut organization. Like my experience tells me this, what I'm seeing is this, let's go to this solution. We are, I like to say, KPI light here. We do them, but they're not really guiding our everyday decision making. And we have not done a good job embedding them into that decision making process. It's good to have gut, but I also want to see those numbers, right? To check that gut a little bit. So we are also facing in Wisconsin, we have local levy limit laws, and our organization is going to be up against those levy limit laws in the very near future, which is going to make that data even more important. To kind of when we start talking about service delivery, when we start talking about is it a cop or is it a public works person, what is our data telling us? Is the response time for police calls to a point that we need to invest in that, and that officer is going to make that difference, and we expect it to move the needle like this, or are we getting behind on street maintenance, and this public works person can add X amount of road miles each year to maintaining our streets. So that is kind of, I come from varied organizations and their sophistication on KPIs and measuring data, and I think it's one of our weaknesses here. But we know it and we're working on a plan for it. But yeah, I do have that quote, like what gets measured gets managed. So what are we measuring and how are we managing it?
That's so cool. And I tell you, it could be a challenging spot to try and figure out how to measure values too, right? In terms of how do we measure that the values are actually, being lived out through our coaching and our recognition? And I know we've got some cool things that we're going to be coming alongside and trying to support that way too. But I think that's kind of when we talk about the future of work in certain aspects with people is there's going to be new data. There's going to be new types of analytics, ways that we need to measure these things with people than some of the traditional ways, right? Of just looking at, okay, what's our attrition rate, our turnover rate? How long does it take to fill a role? Those things still important, but they don't tell the whole picture.
Right. And we've talked internally about, do we redefine what attrition is for here? Did the person leave our organization to go to a promotion that we didn't have? That shouldn't be a negative turnover rate, right? We should see that as a success. We should see that as we guide and grow through them to the point that they had to go elsewhere. Because turnover sometimes is, oh my God, you had this much turnover. But there's always a story behind the turnover. Why did they leave? And how are we measuring that? And let's celebrate that, right? Let's celebrate that person who has a promotion, who's leaving us. Because that, to me, that's not a negative turnover. That is, holy cow, we got great 5 years out of them. Look at everything they've done. And now they're out there with the skills that we've developed, making another community better. So we've started to have those conversations of like, yep, turnover is this, but what is the subcategories of that turnover?
I love that, Caitlin. You brought it back to, sort of the what's the story behind things. And we're hearing a lot about the story of Sun Prairie. And, if you could call out one thing to someone as why the city of Sun Prairie as a place to work and grow and thrive, anything you would bring out, you've brought out a lot. So, I believe a lot of the things you said would say, oh my gosh, I never thought of this kind of stuff happening in a city. So you're definitely shining that way. But anything else you would call out or why the city of Sun Prairie?
I go back to why I came here. I came here in 2021 because I saw an organization that was progressive, not afraid to take risks, and be a leader in the state of Wisconsin on what we do in local government. So kind of like that shine. I think it's all our values, right? It's finding a way. It's shining. It's not being afraid to be the leader. It's not being afraid to try something new. So I think that's a big reason of why Sun Prairie is we're a growing community. We have about 700 new residents each year. We're the second largest community in Dane County, next to the city of Madison, which is very exciting. We have economic diversity in our community, which brings a whole new perspective on how are we helping all of our residents thrive. So I think that's kind of why Sun Prairie is. We are quick pace. It's not a organization for the faint of heart. You can't come here and hide in a cubicle. We're going to find you and we're going to push you. So I think that's kind of why Sun Prairie, it's something new, something, every month there's some new big thing we're working on or doing. And that really excites me. You don't get bored here.
Thanks, Caitlin. So much that we've covered in today's conversation. Jason, you want to kick off? What are some of the highlights? We always call this the level up session. What are things we would call out? I've got so many notes that I've taken on my pad, but anything you would start at that jumped out at you, Jason?
Yeah, I love the bite that Caitlin gave us today of you can't flip a switch and make a manager a coach. How true that is, but just how much we tend to still operate many times in business that way. It takes a while to move from the traditional kind of top-down management style to actually building a coaching culture. And it's got to be tied to your values. And I think that was the other takeaway for me too, Sean, and I'll send it over to you, was just so many times I've heard from leaders that they'll talk about, oh yeah, we have values. And what they mean is that there's some core beliefs that may be on the wall. But Caitlin really took us on a journey today of understanding how you turn those into daily action, how they become ingrained in what we call at Human Works 8, those 12 touch points that happen for people. And that's where the magic happens at work, is when those beliefs then become part of your DNA of what you're doing every day and how you interact with one another in terms of how you approach your work. And Caitlin gave us great examples today of how Guide and Grow, that value, is what their coaching program, as they're trying to move in the coaching direction, that's what it's anchored to, is that value. So when they're talking about recognition, it's tied to their shine value. And so leaders today that are listening to this episode, I hope that's a big takeaway for you is, yeah, you may have some values, and I hope you do. And that's great. That's a great first step. But that next step that Caitlin laid out today is so important, of how then do you take those and activate them and embed them in the things that you're doing on a daily basis with your people. Those were a couple for me. Sean, how about you?
I would agree with all of those, Jason. On that, I had noted that, switching me on to a coach as well. I heard from Caitlin that it was almost time for this team of people to sort of set a new way, a new standard. It's almost like the city of Sun Prairie way is going to be different than other cities as far as how they approach people and culture. And I find that so exciting. I mean, I believe Caitlin's going to be speaking to other cities soon, as far as they're going to want to know what are you doing there in that city? How is that energy? How is that element of people really coming to life quite differently? So that really jumped out to me. And as part of the story, I just want to highlight one thing. When Caitlin first mentioned some sort of gym on something, I was like, what is she talking about, this gym thing? But as she talked about it today and how people are connecting to this development gym through different elements, it's starting to make real sense to me. The way they've sort of put this concept around it and tying it to the values. So that really jumped out to me more than ever. Two other things that jumped out at me, where we started to look at people from life experience. I want to go back to that parenting comment. I think organizations need to really think about that in the interview process. There's a lot to me. There's a lot to you, Jason, a lot to you, Caitlin, and that life experience all add elements to what I'm going to bring to work every single day. And to really honor that, talk about that, and really embrace that, I think is a good thing. And the last thing I wanted to call out, I could call out so many, she said something about working in the city is like giving back to the community as a career. And I guess I've never really heard, city roles talked about that way. And to me, I spoke, and I think Caitlin may have been at that. I spoke at a conference to city administrators, and they were sort of saying, oh, city administration jobs, nobody wants to do them. And I kind of challenged them back there. And I had never worked with a city before, but I still challenged them, said, well, wait a minute, there's something more to a career in a city. And I think Caitlin summed it up so well there when she said, give back to the community as a career. And I think there's a lot of people out there that can really connect to that and say, yeah, that's a part of me. How do I get involved with the city of Sun Prairie or another city to do that? So that really inspired me. And Caitlin, the last thing you said, this WUI work, and I just wanted to highlight that. I guess I have a career of woo-wee work, but it's the good work, is what I say, Caitlin. But I have a new word to call it, and I think it can be labeled that very, very clearly and easily. But at the same time, you brought that back down to tangible things that are having an impact on people and that are helping your organization move forward into the future. And I thank you for that. Those really jumped out to me. So, Caitlin, thanks for joining and being a part of this conversation.
Happy to be here. Thank you for giving me a platform to share all the great things we're doing at the city of Sun Prairie. So thank you.
You are very welcome. And to all our listeners, remember to subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts, and learn more at humanworks8.com/podcast. And if you want to know what I'm wondering about each week, subscribe to my Wondering Wednesday blog on LinkedIn. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Caitlin. And thanks to all of our listeners joining us for today's podcast. Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Now it's up to you. See you next time.